Hello, beautifuls. You're listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Vanessa and I'll be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Brooke Thomas. On the show, we're talking about being students on the embodied spiritual path. And what does that actually mean? What is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything? All the beauty and crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life. We'll be attempting to sort that out for ourselves here on the show, and we're so glad you're listening in. In today's episode, we're talking about why one should meditate. And as usual, we have a lot to say. We're talking about how we've both benefited personally and what the pitfalls of having meditation expectations can be. You'll even learn what Brooke means when she uses the new term, slow blink people. And yes, we should probably create a glossary soon. Just a note before we head into the conversation, Brooke and I do have potty mouths, so as usual, if there are kids around you, you may want to pop in some headphones. Okay, here we go. So I think it'll be fun for us today to actually answer a question that is seemingly simple, but that I think you and I have a lot to say about. So, dear Brooke Thomas, may we begin this conversation with the question, why meditate?
Oh, yes. Yes, we may. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. So I feel like meditation is in this place right now where yoga probably was a long time ago, where it was starting to become a part of the vernacular. Lots of people were doing it. I feel like it's picking up speed in the sense that we'll soon have like meditation centers on every corner of the way that we now do yoga studios. And like that, things get lost when they blow up really quickly. So with the yoga world, there's so much of it, right, that's about looking super hot in Lululemon pants, which is totally fine. Like, it's fine to look hot in Lululemon pants, but also really not what was intended by yoga. So it's a fine thing if it like gives you the bod you want to rock, but it's definitely not what yoga was. And so with meditation, I'm interested to see as it explodes in popularity, we have all these neuroscientists who are studying it. Mindfulness is definitely a buzzword. It's being introduced to all kinds of different clinical populations in need. And I'm like, how is this all going to translate once it's a part of popular culture, which I think is 2 seconds away, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm seeing happening that I find really interesting is, and similar to yoga, actually, there's just this blanket halo put on it. It's just good. It just makes everything good. Like a lot of people will do yoga because they think it's just going to fix anything that's wrong with their body. Like, I have knee problems. I should really do yoga. I'm like, okay, but can we talk it through a little more? Like, what are you thinking? And what kind of yoga? And who's your teacher? And what's the approach? And so with meditation too, it's like if I do meditation, I'll be calmer. I'll be nicer. I'll be more easygoing. I'll be more productive at work. I'll have less anxiety. And I feel like the researchers are pointing to that too. Here's the benefits. Here's the benefits. Here's the benefits. And I'm super psyched that we're talking about the fucking benefits. But at the same time, because we get so caught up by these things, before and after snapshots, we make it the after snapshot. Like before, without meditation, cranky, yelled at my kids. After, superstar at work and, the best mom ever. And it just becomes about these outcomes. And I don't know. So what do you think about that? Because just to start, I have lots to say about why we do meditate, but I'm interested in watching this process happen as the conversation about meditation spreads.
Well, I think that's why I started meditating, was because of the before and after shot. And as I'm sure we've said on the show, if not saying it right now, I wanted to be happy, happy, joy, joy all of the time. And I wanted to meditate away my personality defects that I perceived. I wanted to meditate away anxiety. I wanted to meditate away pain. I wanted to actually meditate away feelings. Mm-hmm. At the age that I started meditating, which is 26, and between 26 to 33, I was very active. It was like, I wasn't even comfortable having a feeling that was uncomfortable. So I get it, right? And I think what you're addressing, we're talking at a societal level, but we're really speaking at the human experience level, is that perhaps one of the problems is it's all too tempting when people dangle this research in front of you, and when you approach it with the intention of fixing something, to get swept up into the mentality that A, something's wrong with you, B, there's a shortcut answer to fix what's wrong with you, and C, at the end of it, you'll be in some kind of happily ever after, never having a messy human emotion experience. So I guess when we start to look at why meditate, I think it's important that we bring in the idea of the intention that you come to the practice with, which is something I talk about a lot when I teach the class. It's like, well, what intention do you have as you sit down on your cushion? Because your intention is going to define your experience. And I think it does point a little bit to what you're saying, Brooke, which is if you're approaching it with the intention, like, I have to fix myself and I want to fix this stupid anxiety because I don't want to have any feelings, like P.S. I used to have as an intention.
P.S. I still struggle not to have that intention.
Still do it. But if you approach like that, you're going to get a certain experience. I mean, I had someone once say the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And I don't wholly know if it's true, but we can take the same self-deprecating attitude, the same I have to fix myself attitude, the same I don't want to be human, the same I don't want to feel messy attitude, and bring that into our practice. And I'm suspecting some of what you're noticing is that at large, society is bringing the same scientific, we're robotic, we can fix everything with a 20-minute exercise attitude that you probably abhor on multiple levels to our precious ancient tradition of meditation.
Yeah. So I do totally detest that, of course, because it just keeps us pinging. First of all, it keeps us in self-loathing. That bettering ourselves is because there's something terrible about ourselves to begin with. And it's really just not what we do meditation for. I mean, I do it because I want to not be so stuck in my tiny mind. And that does translate to feeling better. So the last thing I'm trying to do is to say, like, just do it because it has innate virtue. In fact, what I actually believe, and for me, just skipping right to like, why do I meditate? I meditate because my life changes if I do it. And I tried to change my life in a myriad of other ways. That kept me stuck in the tiny mind, striving, working really hard, leaning in, and just kind of pushing at life, like push about my ideas of how I think it should go or how I would think I would feel better or what would make me happy. And it was all coming from this ego mind, meaning the part of my brain that can't actually know, because I'm just coming up, formulating ideas and then robotically acting them out and then just chasing my own tail endlessly. And so when I really committed to my practice, it was definitely an I give up. Like, I give up. Nothing has worked. So it does come from that place of, I want something to change. And then my life did change, but my life didn't change based on the prescriptions I was giving it from afar. It just started to lead me around. It started to unfold. It started to feel like flow, which is completely different than having specific goals, being nicer, being better at work, being whatever. So honestly, like if I'm being totally honest, the reason why I meditate is because my life changes. Like I'm not just doing it because people say it's virtuous. And yet it also has completely shifted my orientation of what better means and what a forward moving life means and feels like. It's like rat in a maze versus actually having, not all the time, but experiences of genuine flow and ease and momentum and deliciousness, and also real unpleasantness too that arises. Really fucking genuine unpleasant shit. And yet it's like suddenly I can dance with it in a different way.
Well, you're talking a little bit about, I think, the outcomes, right? Which is why I meditate. Typically, we do anything because we're looking towards an outcome. So if we're going to be really fair, probably most people across time, and not all, but a large majority, sat down on a cushion to breathe or to meditate or to do yoga because something didn't feel right to them.
Yeah.
However you want to classify that, right? So maybe I have anxiety, maybe I have stress, maybe I have depression, maybe I just feel like something's missing. Whatever the case may be, I think the original intention and the original hope for the outcome is I sit down because something doesn't feel right. And I hope that after sitting, something will feel better and different. So I think, it's fair to say that we're all going to sit down with some measure of hope or some measure of expectation that we'll feel better after. And I think that's actually just fine because I think that's the human thing. It's almost like when Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, like, depression is great and anxiety is great because it's so workable, but also because if you felt pretty good all of the time, you would never take the messy, hard steps towards evolution. It's easy to coast. They call that the God realms in Buddhism. It's like everything's just fine. And the picture is this God kicking back with like a cocktail by a pool. It's like, why would I ever confront human nature and what's happening on this earth and like how I could be the most open-hearted version of myself ever? Like, why would you ever do any of that if everything was like easy? So I think the intention is normal if we sit down and we say, I want something to shift. But I do think there's a couple of things you identified that I really relate to. One is that your life changes. So if you all have been sitting down and meditating 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes, whatever practice you've been doing, and yet nothing has changed in your life, not the way you experience it, not the way you think about it, not the way you relate with people, not the way you relate to yourself, nothing, then is that really an alive and useful practice? So I like the idea of observing to see, is my life changing? And then I think it's almost like you're opening up the door to expand the thought on what meditation has to offer. Because if we read all of these articles about mindfulness these days, we'll think that what there is to offer is less stress or more focus. And it's so compartmentalized. It's like, oh my God, I had a teacher who used to call this Mick mindfulness. He's like, what you were saying, there's going to be like a mindfulness studio everywhere. And it's like, I will just follow these 10 minutes and then I will be peaceful. And it's like, it's completely detached from tradition. It's completely detached from any spirituality. And, this is what's happening. And so I think that as meditation is being spoken about, it's narrowed in what it offers people. And that has maybe two detrimental effects. One is, you're missing out on the aliveness and the human life that can come from it and the deep, deep, deep connection with self and other and earth and the universe. Two is, it's not wholly true. It's not wholly true because as you go in, you go in.
Right. And you find out whatever's up there.
Oh shit. And like you and I know. So it's almost like, it's hilarious to all of you listening because Brooke and I want you to all meditate with us. That is obviously our subtext. Please meditate with us. And yet we're also giving you a cautionary tale that's saying it's not just about chasing peace, because if you chase peace, you're going to miss the experience. You're going to force yourself into peace, which is really not true peace. It's a forced state of mind. But rather expand and realize that what meditation is, to me, in my personal experience, is going in and making space for yourself to exist. And that means everything. Your feelings, your wounds, your pain, your joy, your beauty, your unique wantings, your unique cravings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's going in and making space for all, for reality, for you in your entirety to exist, and then being with that.
Yeah.
And that's a lot fucking bigger than just a little less stress.
Yeah. It's vast. I think impossible for us until we're at a certain stage of development, and I'm certainly not there, but impossible for us to understand just how vast, because you're playing for ultimate freedom instead of an idea you have about yourself, becoming what I call the slow blink people. You know,
blink
the people who do the slow blink, and it makes them look really spiritual. You've met slow blink people on retreat. They just slow down their blinks, you know, but they slow down their everything, and they've put themselves in a prison of, if I come off this way, I seem like a good person. And we're going to do a whole other episode on how the need for approval is the work of the devil, but you get my gist, you know? And so what you're saying is so critical, because it's that we have to stop putting everything into these little boxes, which unfortunately is what research is designed to do. And unfortunately, like when we hear those stories told with those parameters, because there have to be parameters in order to gather data and make conclusions, then we just limit it to that. And we lose all of the ability to really, truly, truly evolve and to experience our lives and our worlds completely differently.
Well, when I did the certificate in Buddhist psychology with Nalanda, I had two different teachers, Joe and Miles. And this was actually like a kind of debate between them, like a heated debate, if you will, where Joe was of the idea that no matter why someone meditated and no matter what they thought they were going to get out of it, even if they thought it was just going to be peace of mind and they were trying to push away all those uncomfortable parts of themselves, that it was good, that as many people as could meditate, the better. Even if it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, if it was scripted, unscripted, just the McMindfulness thing that Miles was so afraid of, to Joe was good, because ultimately, maybe not everybody's interested in finding freedom this time around in their life. But if they could learn how to breathe, if they can have a few moments of quiet and peace where they're not scared to be with themselves, that was enough, that was changing enough. And maybe all that person wanted. Miles came from the opposite side that I think you're speaking from a little bit, which is just, it is like a degradation of an ancient tradition that has so much potential to heal and to free and to release people, so much potential to change the world, change our human experience. And that we're, again, compartmentalizing it. We're making it small. We're organizing it into scientific blocks the way we always do. And that really, ultimately, we're cheapening it. And so he was really against the approach of like recommending just 5 minutes of mindfulness meditation a day based on scientific studies that you'll get chilled after. And, you know, I have to say, I see both sides personally. Like, on the one hand, I just think, okay, going back to when I started meditating, I'm 26 years old. I'm suffering. I don't believe I'm lovable. I have so much anxiety. I'm grappling with depression. I'm grappling with like suicidal thinking. I mean, I'm in a pit. Now, at that point, am I thinking about trying to attain absolute liberation and freedom and like comfort with all my messy parts? And no, like at that point, I'm trying to think about how to breathe and how to like, really get out of my narratives a little more, right? Like get out of the stories a little more. So I'm of both minds, because I think that it's important to have the perfume, so that everyone can participate from wherever you're starting, whatever mindset and experience you're starting from. You can know like, hey, sitting with myself for 5 minutes and breathing, which for some people seems like terrorizing, like terrible, is cool. That's fine. And it's like, and then maybe from there, they'll get turned on to the next thing and get turned on to the next thing.
Well, do you agree that like, I'm curious what your thought is. If I'm that person, and I have been that person plenty, where I sit down 5 minutes a day so that I can experience less anxiety, and that's it. I just want to experience less anxiety in my life. Don't you think that if you do that before you know it, the path is widening and deepening and it's taking you someplace else?
I mean, to a certain extent. So that's why maybe we don't need to worry about it. And that's why maybe Joe's approach, I think that's kind of Joe's idea. I think to a certain extent, I think some people will meditate 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day, and that is all they will ever do. Most people will meditate once or twice and drop off, maybe 10 times and drop off. That's probably the truth of the matter. And then other people will do it religiously and never open the door to the sacred mysteries of the world and to their inner psychological workings and to all their emotions. And I think the good percentage of people that stick it out with having a regular practice will get increasingly curious about what else there is to experience, like what they haven't evolved into yet. And the fact of the matter is, it does give you more peace of mind. It does. It does give you more ability not to focus on your narratives. It does. And yet, people who are seeking truth tend to seek truth, and just that little bit of relief is not enough for them. So they will then go traipsing down the rabbit hole of meditation and within a context and within a tradition.
Yeah. So for me, in thinking about it, like, for me personally, there are only two routes that I find kind of troubling, let's say, with meditating. One would be, and our mentor, Kieran, just did a great piece on this that I'll link to in the show notes. She called it Enough Spiritual Crap, which I thought was great. And she was talking about multiple things, but one of the things she mentioned is that like meditation is not endurance training. And I think a lot of us approach it that way. Like, I'm going to be a good person. People are saying this is good and valuable, so I'm going to sit down and clock my minutes. But like, what's actually happening when you're on the cushion? Like, are you actually deepening into yourself, or are you just continuing to be discursive? And I don't mean stop having any thoughts. I just mean where you're really not able to differentiate the difference between dropping in and experiencing more clarity versus just your normal thing, except sitting on a cushion. So I think that's problematic because you're still chasing your own tail. You're just doing it within the confines of something that people are telling you is good and virtuous. And then your life doesn't change, so that's what you were saying before. Like, that's the sort of marker, is like, is something shifting? It doesn't have to be, seeing angels descend. It's just, is something shifting? Is there some movement? And like, I was using the visual a while ago of like that moment where, I don't know if anyone's ever been up somewhere north when, it really tips over into spring. Like, I was in New Hampshire recently, and there's all those lakes up there. And it was the day the ice broke up, that it got warm enough. And it was just like all these ice flows and bobbing little ice. And there's this movement in this thing that seemed unmovable. You should start to have some sensation of that, some evidence, actual tangible reality of shift in your life. Instead of just making yourself a slave to some concept that people are telling you should do. And then the other one is the slow blink people, where somebody has described an image of what a spiritual person is like. And that person looks like this, they're never get phased. They never feel anger or sadness or lust. They just, or just really don't experience negative emotions. Hooray. And then you're putting yourself into a different kind of prison where you're locking yourself into this false ideal, which really keeps you shut off from the world. And really, it's just a way to block and deny all negative emotions under this sort of veil of the halo of spiritual practice, air quotes,
I believe I've talked about the spiritual superego before on the show, but I'm not sure. When I went to school for transpersonal psychology, and we talked about that a lot, like as people start to explore spirituality, we can very easily have our ego co-opt an identity around it. And this identity of like, I'm now going to be spiritually perfect or spiritually good or spiritually superior or something like that. We develop this spiritual superego. So it's like, that's not good spiritual behavior. That's not what a good spiritual person would do. You have to meditate every day. You have to do this. You have to do that. And so I can see these things all do come up. They all come up. Everything you're saying comes up because it's human. These are the things we grapple with. Like as soon as we have an expectation for what meditation should look like, i.e., I should be more peaceful, calm, have less default mode network thoughts, and et cetera, then as soon as we fall short, we have a reaction. Either we're bad or we're not doing it right or we're not good at meditation or meditation doesn't work. It's all bullshit. And I think that's why spiritual teachers forever have been very careful about setting any expectations. Buddha gave like no expectations for what you'll get. He did every once in a while say love and joy. He did. But by and large, if you really listen to any specific spiritual teacher for over time, like you actually studied one's teachings, you'll see they take away expectations. They give, they take away, they give, they take away. And I think it's so that people don't get caught up in this idea of if I do this, then it will look like that. Because it's probably like we were talking about on the law of attraction episode. Our brain really is only capable of taking what it saw in the past and projecting it onto the future, in which case our expectations are already skewed. We cannot even possibly imagine the kinds of things that we could experience from getting into deeper contact with ourselves. So that was like the first thing that stood out about what you were saying. The other thing that occurred to me is, we have a unique approach to meditation. You and I and the people that we study with and the people that we're deeply involved in practicing with, we take meditation to mean deepening into the sacredness of our human existence in this world and becoming more and more in touch with the reality of the human experience in this world. And not every spiritual tradition sees it that way, which is why there's so many different kinds of meditations. But for me, at this point in my life, why do I sit and meditate? I do it to heal. I do it for freedom. I do it because I have an eternal lust for truth that is insatiable and unquenchable. And I cannot sit knowing that I am seeing or experiencing illusions. It's like impossibly uncomfortable for me. So I sit there because I trust, I know just from working with people and from myself and from teachers, I just know that the only way to deal with this is you have to go in and reclaim the essence of who you are, the essence of your divinity, and you have to make space for that to exist. And that happens only by making space. Only way I really know how to do that, well, I probably know how to do it in a few ways, but the way that's occurring to me right now is I meditate.
You're sketching it out broadly, but I'm wondering if you can fill in the details a little more. Because I think, talking about our experiences is what we're up to here, since we're just on the path. We don't hold all the answers. And you were describing, who you were when you started meditating. You wanted the bad feelings to go away. You wanted to not experience unpleasant emotions. And so these days, having a long-standing practice that you're really dedicated to, if you're comparing what your practice feels like now versus what it felt like then, or what you gain from it, maybe, I'm curious if you could say a little more in depth there. Hooray, putting you on the spot.
Well, oh gosh, I don't want anyone listening to be disencouraged by the story that I'm about to tell.
It hasn't all been rainbows and unicorns? What?
There's no unicorn poop in the story I'm about to tell. So when I started meditating back when I was 26, as I was describing, I started with a Shambhala style of meditation. It is still Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche style, who is Reggie Ray's teacher. So of the lineage, I have always held him close to me. But it was Shambhala, and the meditation was mindfulness ultimately, but that's a simplistic way to say it. But it's sitting quiet, eyes open, looking down. Don't think too much. Think, come back to your breath. Think, come back to your breath. Have a feeling, label your feeling. So it's a very, very typical style of meditation and open. And I was doing it 45 minutes a day, and I had gone on retreat. And frankly, what it felt like, Brooke, was like I was falling apart. I felt like I was falling apart. Really, I felt like I was falling apart, like I was going to lose it. It was a very weird experience, like something was crumbling.
Like emotionally falling apart.
Yeah, but I only felt it as I'm falling apart.
Yeah.
You know, like I didn't even have that kind of a keen insight to say, oh, this must be, it was like, I'm losing my shit was how it felt. Now, at the time, I didn't have a Sangha, which if you don't know, if you're listening, that means like a community of people you meditate with. I didn't have a regular teacher. I had studied with John Wellwood, but I wasn't in communication with him regularly at the time. I didn't really have anyone to go to. I spoke to my ex-husband about it, who had some experience with meditation. He said, you know what, maybe you'd better stop for now, because you really are meant to have a teacher or a Sangha or people that you're in communion with, actually, traditionally for meditation. Anyway, fast forward to now, I have a couple of thoughts about that. I think that I had trauma that I didn't deal with, that I didn't know how to deal with, that was being unearthed by sitting there. I think I had expectations about what it should be that weren't being met, and I just further inflamed my own self-esteem crisis. And I think I was actually probably getting somewhere. Actually getting somewhere, getting to the truth of me, but I wasn't ready and I didn't have any understanding. Like no one sketched out a path. No one sketched out a journey. So a couple of things to say is one of the dilemmas we can run into with meditation these days is many people are doing it alone on apps like Headspace or YouTube clips. And I'm a fan of that. I recommend it to clients. I have no problem with it. But if you have been through something, or if you're just ready to open, to uncrack, you will start to go there. And there's no path. There's no guidance. There's no one who says, this is normal. Oh, wait, no, try that. Oh, wait, no, this. Oh, here's what it normally can unfold like. There's just nothing foreseen. And so it can be very confusing. There's no one to talk about it with. And quite frankly, we can do a lot of spiritual bypassing, or we can give up too soon because we don't understand that we're on to something. Okay, that was my caveat. But today, fast forward to today, as I started to learn Tantric Buddhist meditations, everything changed. My interest levels changed. My experience changed. P.S. I had done a ton of therapy in between the times that I did these two. So maybe that was something. But what I've noticed is when I was younger, I always felt like something was missing. I felt like something was missing. I felt kind of empty sometimes, or I felt fake feels like a wrong word to say, but there was a sense of like something doesn't feel authentic. Like it didn't feel right and I'm empty. And that's hard to articulate, but it was an experience that I can remember. And I don't feel like that anymore. And part of it was through therapy, I reclaimed aspects of myself. But a lot of it is, as I meditated with the body, I made space for myself to exist. I can't say it a different way. You've heard me say it like a gajillion times this episode, but it's like I came into contact, but like warm, open, receptive contact with everything about me that I've ever feared was loathsome or terrible or intolerable or would be overwhelming. As in, if I have this emotion, I'll fall apart. If I see these voices, I'll fall apart. If I see my despair, I'll fall apart. If I think like that, I'm terrible, et cetera, et cetera. This warm, loving contact. And you learn a few things. I learned that I can tolerate my emotions, that they're not going to tear me apart, that they never did. Hello, I already had them. So I can have them. I can face them. I can breathe with them. I learned that like I can feel myself. I can feel whole. And then in my wholeness, I can feel confident and I can feel ease. And so it's interesting because some days, Brooke, like, you and I will text each other and it's like, I'm anxious again today, or, oh my God, there's that thought that I used to have or that belief system. And so in those micro moments, you can even feel like, has nothing shifted? And then I look at my life and I look at how I felt and I really remember who I was and what I was experiencing. And it's like everything shifted. And the most important thing, besides the fact that my life is wonderful and I have good, loving relationships and I'm capable of giving and receiving love in a way I wasn't capable of before, like that's all amazing. But maybe the most potent part for me is that nothing's missing anymore. Nothing's missing. I feel myself. And I think what is missing for a lot of us, because I'm sure many of you relate, please tell us if you do, that something feels wrong or missing, or you feel empty, or you feel inauthentic. And it's really just that we didn't have space to contact ourselves. I really think that's all it is.
Beautifully said.
So how about you? Having said that giant mouthful, like, has it changed for you?
Well, I have a different experience of meditate. I started trying to figure out how to meditate. I guess I was 22 or 23 because it was when it was my doctor who was helping me deal with my jaw disorder who told me I needed to learn how to meditate. But I would say that I then spent from like 23 to 40 very much just skimming the surface. Like I found it kind of intolerable. I didn't get anything pleasurable from it at all. Like, so in the very, very beginning, when I was really young, I kind of used it as wish listing. So totally 100% ego mind is in the driver's seat. Brooke, what do you like, talking to the universe as Santa Claus? Kind of thing. That wound up not feeling useful and felt really yucky. And so then, I did that thing that I do where I intellectualize things to death. So I read a bajillion books on Buddhism before I started thinking about meditating again.
I've been there.
Oh yeah. Hey now.
Still there. Going there.
Biography of Buddha. How many are there? Read them all. And, so then I really just started doing, same thing, mindfulness, meditation, notice the thoughts, compassionately label them as thinking, let them go and sit and try and make it, short but consistent, 5, 10, 15 minutes a day. And I really just felt like, and I know I talked about this when you interviewed me in one of the early episodes, but I really felt like I was in a prison. I felt like it was, all the space got kind of small and tight and there was no air. And it increased my anxiety. And, people can hear these things and I can hear these things and think, well, great. And I do think there's something that's really good news about having fear or anxiety or whatever emerge. But in this case, it felt like I was feeding the demon, not just that it was coming up and I could notice it and it could suddenly become workable. And, it was when you introduced me to the idea, because of what I do for work and because of the show that I was running, Liberated Body, and I was interviewing people about somatic meditation. You introduced me to the idea that there was this whole world actually of somatic meditation. And that was like an instantaneous love affair. It was like the thing that I had been seeking finally found me, because I had an experience not too dissimilar from what you're describing, where when I started doing the practices, what I discovered was the exact opposite of feeling like I was in an airtight prison. And I felt like I could contact this part of myself that felt not like me, really, actually, because it was so spacious, so big and yummy, like really good. And it was this feeling of, and this is not to say like, and now that I do somatic meditation, it's always bliss, because that is definitely not the case. But what I do have is this contact point now with a ground of being that feels big and nourishing. And so even when things come up, and even when they feel pretty intractable, there's a place for me to go that doesn't feel like I'm wearing a straitjacket. It feels like an unburdening. It feels like I can rest into something much bigger and juicier and more delightful than myself. So I would say that that has been the big game changer. And ever since discovering that, there's just been this tremendous acceleration of like moving towards this love affair of like, how much more can I discover? Like, how much more can I find? Even when what it unearths is like stuff that I was going to say in the past and sound all self-righteous. In the past, I would have really not wanted it to come up, but now I just think it's super awesome when I have gnawing anxiety. No, I don't. It always still feels shitty, but there's something to do with the shitty that I didn't have before. And that, my life, I would say, has remarkably changed since dedicating myself to my practice. And so I think that those tangible results also really keep me going.
Well, if that's not good enough reason to meditate, then I don't know what is.
Hey now.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. The show notes, including any resources we mentioned, live at blissandgrit.com. If you go to the website and just scroll down, you'll see each episode's separate post and the resources are right in there. You can also come play with us on the social media channel of your choice, Instagram, Facebook, and what have you. We are Bliss and Grit at all of those spots. If you want to support the show, you can write us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, which helps first to let us know how we're doing, and it also helps other people find us. If technology isn't your thing, but you are enjoying the show, well then just tell your friends who you think might resonate with it. We are so very grateful, and we have loved hearing feedback from each of you. We'll be back again next week, and thanks again so much for listening.